At a remote seaside campground battered by wind and waves, a quiet black groundskeeper prepares for another uneventful day. But when a violent storm hits a week ahead of schedule, chaos erupts as families flee in panic. Amid the stampede, he spots a lost little boy, frozen in fear. Without hesitation, he charges into the storm to save him, unaware that the child is the son of a billionaire, and this act of courage is about to change his life forever. Before we dive in this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thought. It was the middle of July at Eagle Rock Wilderness Retreat, a rustic seaside campground about 20 minutes south of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. The kind of place people came to when they wanted to disconnect from the world but still expected hot water, Wi-Fi, and fresh linens. The campground stretched across 50 acres of salt-kissed forest and sandy trails that led to a wild, untamed beach. No lifeguards, no vendors, no crowd, just crashing waves, wind-warped driftwood, and the occasional osprey circling overhead. Families arrived in caravans, Subarus packed with hammocks and organic trail mix. Couples in hiking boots took selfies in front of the wooden welcome sign that said, "Return to nature, respect her rules." Kids ran barefoot across the pine needles, screaming with excitement while their parents unpacked overpriced gear they didn't know how to use. And then there was Jordan Moore. He wasn't one of the guests, he wasn't part of the brochures or the smiling website photos, but without him the whole place would collapse. He was the groundskeeper, the janitor, the man who fixed whatever broke and cleaned up whatever mess others left behind. Every morning before sunrise, Jordan moved quietly through the campgrounds like a shadow with a purpose. He wasn't tall, but his presence carried weight. His skin was deep brown, his frame lean but solid. His hands were always dirty from soil, rust, or ash. Proof of a man who worked, not talked. He wore the same thing every day, a sun-faded green shirt with the retreat's logo peeling off the chest, and a beat-up pair of jeans tucked into heavy black boots that had seen more than one storm. His face was lined not just with age but with experience, deep creases around the mouth and eyes, a furrow that never quite relaxed between his brows. When he spoke, which was rare, his voice was low, sandpaper soft, and deliberate, like each word cost something. He didn't offer opinions, he offered solutions. This morning, like every morning, he was out before the camp stirred. The air was thick and salty, the sky already glowing orange over the trees. Jordan was pushing an old metal cart stacked with tools, zip ties, duct tape, wrench sets, extra light bulbs. The wheels squeaked with every turn, but he didn't seem to mind. At Site 3, someone had left a fire pit full of beer cans and half-burned logs. Jordan crouched, grunting softly as his knees popped. He began pulling the cans out one by one, his gloved hands moving with mechanical rhythm. Behind him, a voice snapped through the quiet. "Hey, what are you doing? Don't ruin the pit." It was Terry, the assistant manager. Young, cocky, with mirrored sunglasses and the kind of voice that made people clench their teeth. Jordan turned slowly, meeting Terry's reflection in those damn sunglasses. "Just cleaning up," he said, calm but not friendly. Terry waved a hand toward the stone ring. "That pit's custom stone. You scratch it, you pay for it." Jordan stood up, his back stiff from the crouch. "Not scratching nothing. Just doing my job." Terry stepped closer, arms crossed. "Yeah, well, don't make it look worse than it already does. We've got social media influencers coming next week. We're trying to make this place look not like a dump." That word, dump, hit Jordan like a punch to the ribs. He didn't flinch, but something shifted in his eyes. There was a pause. Then slowly he bent down, picked up the last beer can, and placed it in the trash bag. "Got it," he said, voice flat, clipped. Terry scoffed and walked off without another word. Jordan watched him go, his lips pressed into a thin line. He didn't say it out loud, but inside he wanted to yell, "This pit's been here longer than that kid's been out of diapers." He had rebuilt that damn ring after the storm last year, stone by stone, when no one else would show up in the rain. But Jordan didn't yell. He never yelled. Not here. Not anymore. He wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, leaving a streak of soot across his temple, and turned toward the maintenance shed. As he passed rows of cabins with wind chimes dancing in the breeze and hammocks swaying under the trees, no one waved, no one noticed, except one boy. From the porch of cabin 7, a small blond kid, maybe 8, sat cross-legged and wide-eyed. He had jelly on his cheek and a stick in his hand, poking at something invisible. When he saw Jordan, he paused. Then, without hesitation, he waved. Not a timid wave, but full, like he meant it. Jordan slowed for just a second. His brow furrowed. Then, slowly, he lifted his hand and gave a short wave back. The boy smiled wide, like it meant the world. And Jordan... He felt something stir inside his chest. A strange warmth. Not joy, not pride. Something older. Something like memory. Something like hope. Then he kept walking. Far off, beyond the trees, the sea groaned against the shore louder than usual. The wind began to pick up, blowing dried pine needles across the path in swirling bursts. Jordan glanced up at the sky. The clouds weren't right. They were moving fast and thick. The weather station said no storm until next week. But Jordan had lived through 20 hurricane seasons. He knew what he was seeing, and something deep in his gut said, "This storm isn't waiting." He picked up his pace. By 11:30 a.m., the sky over Eagle Rock Wilderness Retreat had turned the color of wet cement. The cheerful chirping of birds vanished. The waves beyond the dunes no longer lapped the shore gently. They pounded again and again, louder, harder, like a warning drum beating from the belly of the ocean. The campground, once filled with laughter and music, shifted into a strange, buzzing quiet, like the forest itself was holding its breath. Jordan Moore stood in the middle of the main trail, his eyes narrowed, his jaw locked tight as he stared at the horizon. The wind had started to bend the pine trees, not in a gentle dance, but in sharp, jerky movements, snapping branches and sending leaves swirling through the air like angry confetti. Jordan's instincts, forged through decades of living on the coast, screamed one truth: this storm wasn't a maybe. It was here, and it was early, way too early. Inside the main lodge, Terry was still sipping his iced coffee like it was any other day. When Jordan stepped in, soaked with sweat and wind-tossed grit, his voice was low but urgent. "You need to get everyone prepped. That storm ain't waiting till Saturday, it's coming now." Terry looked up, annoyed. "It's not scheduled, Jordan. It's not on the tracker." Jordan stepped closer. "And you think storms check in with your tracker?" "I'm telling you, we've got hours, not days." Terry scoffed and waved a hand like he was swatting a fly. "All right, Grandpa Hurricane, calm down. I'm not sounding alarms because the sky got a little moody." That hit hard. The casual mockery, the disrespect. Jordan's fists clenched at his sides. His voice dropped lower, more direct. "You wait too long, you'll have parents screaming, kids lost, tents flying into the trees. You want that on your name?" That finally landed. Terry's face twitched. Without another word, he grabbed the walkie-talkie and made the call. "All staff to stations. Prep for possible weather event. Begin standard storm drill procedures." Within minutes, the campground turned into a swarm. Staff ran across the trails, taping windows, securing canoes, shouting at guests to begin evacuating. Panic spread faster than the wind. Campers dropped folding chairs, kids started crying, teenagers shoved sleeping bags into trunks, and car engines roared to life across the site. Jordan didn't stop to watch. He moved fast and hard, checking every site, calling into tents, guiding families out toward the main gravel road. His legs ached, but he didn't slow down. He'd seen what these sudden storms could do: floods, falling trees, twisted metal. This wasn't about weather. It was about survival. Then, just as he was passing the edge of the meadow near the trailhead that led to the overlook, he heard it. A scream. Short, high-pitched, panicked. His head snapped toward the sound. Through the flurry of bodies and gear, he spotted something that froze his blood cold. A boy. Alone. Small. Stumbling. He was the kid from cabin 7. blonde hair wild in the wind, arms out, face streaked with dirt and tears. People rushed past him, nobody stopped. Someone even bumped into the boy's shoulder, nearly knocking him over. He spun in a daze, disoriented, lost in the chaos. Jordan didn't hesitate. "Hey!" he barked, his voice cutting through the wind like a crack of thunder. "Move!" He ran against the current of people. A woman cursed as he shoved past her. A man shouted something Jordan didn't catch. None of it mattered. All he saw was that kid, terrified, frozen like a deer in headlights, as the wind ripped a tarp clean off a nearby SUV and sent it flying. "Kid? Hey, look at me!" Jordan shouted again. The boy finally turned, eyes wide, lips trembling. Jordan lunged, arms out. The moment their bodies collided, Jordan wrapped the boy in a tight grip and dropped to one knee, shielding him as a branch snapped overhead and crashed down just feet away. "It's all right. I got you. I got you," Jordan muttered, his breath ragged, one hand over the boy's head, the other gripping his back. The kid sobbed into his chest. People continued stampeding past them, eyes glazed with fear, too focused on themselves to notice the man kneeling in the dirt, cradling a child like a soldier in the middle of a war zone. Jordan stood slowly, lifting the boy with both arms. The kid clung to him like a baby possum, fingers clenched in his shirt. "What's your name?" Jordan asked, voice rough but gentle. "C. Caleb," the boy stammered, voice shaking. "All right, Caleb, we're going somewhere safe." He didn't head toward the main road. No time, no guarantee, too many people, too much panic. Instead, Jordan turned toward the edge of the retreat, where the trees thickened and the trail narrowed. Toward Cabin 12? His cabin. The trail to Cabin 12 twisted through a patch of dense pine, where the wind howled between the trees like a warning siren. Jordan's arms were burning, but he didn't dare stop. Caleb's small fingers clutched at his collar, face buried in his neck, body trembling with every gust. The boy wasn't crying anymore. He was too scared for tears. Jordan moved with purpose, every step jarring, boots slamming into wet dirt as branches snapped behind them. He glanced over his shoulder once. The campground was disappearing in the distance, swallowed by rising winds and scattering debris. People were still running, shouting, slamming car doors. Jordan didn't see the boy's parents. No one had been calling his name. No one had been looking for him. They reached Cabin 12 in under 5 minutes, though it felt like an hour. It wasn't much, just a one-room wood structure on a raised platform, weathered and dark, with a screen door that creaked louder than it should. Jordan kicked it open with his boot, crossed the room in 3 strides, and gently laid Caleb on the cot by the back wall. The boy's eyes were wide, his chest rising fast, face pale beneath the dirt and snot. Jordan leaned down, voice steady but serious. "You're safe now, Caleb. You hear me? You're safe here." Caleb nodded, but barely. His lips moved, no sound came. Jordan turned to the corner, grabbed an old wool blanket and wrapped it around the boy's shoulders. Then he shut the door, latched it tight, and pulled down the hurricane shutter over the small window. The wind screamed outside. Rain hammered the roof. Somewhere in the woods a tree cracked and fell with a deep splintering thud. Jordan's heart pounded. He'd been through hurricanes before, but never like this, never without warning, never with a child involved. He lit the propane stove, set a kettle of water on top, and grabbed 2 cans of soup from the shelf above the sink. Caleb flinched at the first whistle of the kettle. Jordan moved slowly, sat on the edge of the bed. "You like chicken noodle?" he asked. A whisper. "Yeah." "That's good," Jordan said, trying to offer something close to a smile, though his face wasn't used to the motion. "I got that, and crackers. Not fancy, but it's food." He placed the bowl in the boy's lap and handed him a spoon. Caleb's hands shook as he dipped in, but he ate, spoon by spoon, slurping quietly. Jordan watched him for a long moment, then turned back to the window. He couldn't see anything beyond the shutter, but he could hear. And what he heard wasn't just rain. It was war. Trees groaning, wind howling, branches thudding the walls like fists. The lights flickered twice, then cut out completely. Jordan didn't flinch. He grabbed the lantern, lit the wick, and filled the room with a soft orange glow, though they sat that way for hours. Caleb fell asleep mid-chew, curled under the blanket, hands still holding the spoon. Jordan didn't sleep. He sat in the old chair by the stove, arms crossed, eyes half closed, but mind sharp. The storm raged until midnight, then again into morning, then again into the next night. It didn't move through, it stayed. Stalled. Angry, brutal. No one came. No phones, no radio, just them. On the second day, Caleb woke up sobbing. "Where's my dad?" he cried, his voice cracking. "Where's my mom?" Jordan moved to the bed, crouched low, hands on his knees. "I don't know yet, but I promise you, when that sky clears, I'll find 'em. That's a promise I don't break." Caleb looked up, tears in his lashes. "What if they left me?" "They didn't," Jordan said firmly, sharper than he meant to. "They didn't, all right. No parent would leave you behind. Storm just got in the way, that's all." The boy didn't answer. He just leaned forward, wrapped his arms around Jordan's neck, and held on. Jordan froze, just for a second, then placed a hand on the boy's back, awkward, unsure. His throat tightened. No one had hugged him like that in years, not since his own son was little, not since the night his wife passed. That memory slammed back into him like a wave, sudden and choking, but he pushed it down, swallowed it whole. He made hot cocoa that night, using the last of the powdered mix. Caleb laughed for the first time when Jordan burned his tongue and muttered, "Damn fool." They played a short game of checkers with old bottle caps. When the rain softened just slightly, Jordan told Caleb a story about how he used to build boats out of bark and race them in the gutters. The boy listened wide-eyed, every so often asking, "Really?" And Jordan would nod, "Sure did." That night, Caleb whispered as he fell asleep, "You're like my grandpa." Jordan didn't answer, but he stayed sitting there next to the bed long after the boy had drifted off, watching the lantern flicker, listening to the storm slow, just a little. By the dawn of the third day, the sky had turned from black to gray. The trees outside were broken in every direction. The campground was likely torn to pieces. Jordan stood at the window, arms crossed, shoulders tense. It was time. The morning of the third day arrived not with sunlight, but with a dull gray hue that washed over the forest like ash. The rain had stopped hours earlier, but the silence it left behind was heavier than the storm. Trees were bent and splintered across trails like matchsticks, leaves pasted to windows like wet fingerprints. Mud covered everything, paths, stones, stairs. The air smelled of soaked earth and broken bark, the kind of smell Jordan Moore had learned to associate with survival. He stepped outside cabin 12 slowly, his boots sinking into the softened ground. The wind had dropped to a whisper, but the weight of what had passed still pressed on his shoulders. Behind him, Caleb sat on the cot, legs crossed under the wool blanket, watching Jordan's every move through the cabin window. The boy hadn't said much that morning, just sat quietly, hands folded, face pale but calm. Jordan didn't push him. There was a rhythm to trauma, and the boy was still moving through it. Jordan scanned the horizon. The campground, once bustling, now looked like a battlefield. Tarps flapped from trees. A kayak sat upright on a picnic table. The flagpole at the main lodge had snapped in half. And yet, no sirens, no people, no search crews, just the endless quiet and the creaking groan of a broken wind chime swinging from a branch. Back inside, Jordan knelt beside the boy and placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "All right, Caleb, now that the sky's cleared, we're going to figure out where your folks are. But first, we got to let somebody know where we are." Caleb nodded, eyes locked on Jordan's face. "Do you think they're looking for me?" Jordan didn't answer right away. He stood, walked over to the cabinet, and pulled out an old emergency radio wrapped in a towel. It was dented, dusted, and looked like it hadn't been touched in years. He set it on the table and muttered, "They damn well better be." He twisted the dial, nothing but static, adjusted the antenna, still nothing. He slapped the side with the palm of his hand, once, twice, then tried again, and there it was. A faint voice crackled, warped. Rescue units currently active. Repeat. If you are within the Eagle Rock retreat perimeter, signal your location. Child reported missing. Caleb Whitmore, age 8. Jordan froze. His breath caught in his throat. He turned slowly toward the boy. Caleb stared at him, blinking. "That's me." Jordan swallowed hard. "Your last name's Whitmore?" Caleb nodded. "Yeah. My dad's name is Richard Whitmore." Jordan felt his knees weaken slightly. He backed into the chair and sat down hard. His voice was quiet but firm. "Richard Whitmore? The tech guy?" Caleb nodded again. "He builds phones and drones. He was on the phone when we got here. He's always on the phone." Jordan rubbed his temples, eyes wide. Lord have mercy. It wasn't just any missing child. It was the missing child. Jordan had seen the man's face on television dozens of times. Forbes, CNN, some charity gala about feeding the future or connecting the unconnected. Jordan didn't care much about rich folks and their philanthropy speeches, but he remembered the name, Whitmore. It carried weight, money, power. And now, that man's son was sitting in his cabin, eating his crackers, sleeping in his bed. Jordan stood again, paced. "That explains it. That explains why nobody found you. They were looking in the wrong damn direction. That camp's too big, too wild. They didn't think to check my corner." He turned back to the boy. "Okay, we're going to go up to the overlook. It's the highest point. I'll send a signal and they'll find us. You ready for that?" Caleb hesitated. "Will you still be there? When they come?" Jordan didn't answer right away. He knelt down again, leveled his eyes with the boy's. "Yeah, I'll be there. Ain't going nowhere. Not until I see you back with your people." The boy reached out, grabbed Jordan's hand and squeezed it. 20 minutes later they stood atop the overlook. Muddy, tired, wind-battered. Jordan raised the flare gun, aimed it high and fired. The red trail arced through the sky, sizzling against the clouds before bursting into a bright signal. Within 10 minutes the chop of blades echoed in the distance. A rescue chopper emerged from the haze, slow and deliberate, circling once before descending near the ridge. A man jumped out before the skids even hit the ground. He was tall, square-jawed, in a tailored coat that didn't belong in the wilderness. His eyes scanned the treetops, the clearing, the boy. Then he broke into a sprint. "Cobb!" he screamed. The boy's face lit up. "Dad!" Jordan stepped back instinctively. The boy ran forward, arms out, straight into the man's embrace. The father dropped to his knees, hugging him so tight it looked like he might never let go. Caleb pointed over his father's shoulder. "He saved me. That man. He kept me safe." Richard Whitmore turned. His eyes met Jordan's. They stared at each other for a long second. No words. Just tension. Just the beginning of what was coming next. The clearing was still thick with smoke from the flare when Jordan Moore felt the rotors of the helicopter kick dust up around his boots. The air stung his eyes, but he didn't blink. He stood firm, arms crossed, watching as Richard Whitmore held his son like a man who'd just found breath after drowning. But that wasn't what Jordan was looking at. He was watching how Richard looked at his son, how he clutched him close, whispered something into the boy's hair, kissed the top of his head like he wasn't sure this moment was real. And for the first time in years, Jordan felt something crack open inside. He had a son too. And though they spoke less than he wanted, he'd have given everything to hold him like that again. But the moment didn't last long. Richard stood up fast, still holding Caleb's hand, his expression turning sharply professional. He scanned Jordan from head to toe. The eyes that moments ago were soft and trembling were now sharp, calculating, almost guarded. He took one slow step forward. "You, the man who kept him alive?" His voice was deep, smooth, rehearsed, the voice of a billionaire who spoke at fundraisers, not kitchens. Jordan nodded once. "Yes, sir. Found him alone near the trail when folks was running. Took him in, kept him fed. Warm? Richard gave a stiff nod, then reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a thick, polished silver money clip. Hundreds folded tight, clean as paper, fresh from the printer. He extended it, arm out like a transaction. Jordan stared at it. He didn't move. Richard raised his brows. I'm not asking. Take it. Jordan's eyes narrowed just a fraction, his voice low and controlled. I didn't do it for money. Richard scoffed, audibly. Right. Of course you didn't. That's what people say. Then they take it anyway. The insult landed fast, hard. Jordan's jaw flexed. He didn't yell, didn't raise his voice. He just stepped forward, slow and deliberate, until they were chest to chest. You think throwing bills at people fixes things. That ain't what your boy needed. He needed arms around him when he was crying in the dark. He needed soup. He needed someone who didn't run. That money, it's late. Richard blinked, clearly not used to being spoken to like that. One of the helicopter crewmen took an awkward half-step forward, but stopped when Richard held up a hand. Caleb's hand tightened in his father's. Dad, he saved me. Richard looked down, softened for just a breath, then back at Jordan. This time his voice dropped a notch. I'm trying to show gratitude. Jordan leaned in, his voice quiet but cutting like a blade. Then listen before you pay. There was a long silence. Richard slowly tucked the money clip away, cleared his throat, and offered a hand instead. Richard Whitmore. Jordan Moore, he replied, shaking the hand with a grip that didn't tremble. Richard held it for a beat longer than necessary, then released. You live around here? I work the grounds, cabin 12. Richard looked down at the muddy boots, the worn jacket, the way Jordan stood like a man used to being overlooked. That's got to change. I'm fine where I am. No, Richard said, firm now, almost to himself. You're not. My son would be dead if you hadn't. I didn't save him so someone would fix my life, Jordan interrupted. I know, Richard replied, quickly, sharply, which is exactly why I will. Another long silence stretched between them, but this time there was no tension, only recognition. Different lives, different worlds, but the same bottom line. This mattered. The rescue team prepared to lift off. A medic gestured to check Caleb, but the boy pulled away. Wait, he comes with us. Jordan smiled faintly but shook his head. Nah, got a busted water line back at 12 I gotta fix. Besides, I don't ride helicopters, I walk. Caleb looked heartbroken. Will I see you again? You will, Jordan said, bending down to meet his eyes. You remember what I told you. You're braver than you think. Richard placed a hand on Caleb's shoulder. But this time, it wasn't to pull him away. It was to anchor him. As the chopper lifted into the smoky sky, Jordan stood still, arms at his sides, eyes on the disappearing speck of steel. He felt the wind whip around him, but his stance didn't waver. Behind him, the forest moaned, broken branches dangling, trails ruined. The campground would need repair. A lot of it. But something in the air felt clearer now. He turned, headed back toward cabin 12. Not knowing that before the day ended the phone in the camp office would ring, and everything would change. By the time Jordan Moore made it back to cabin 12, the sun had finally cracked through the heavy clouds. Thin beams of light slid across the soaked forest floor, catching the edges of broken branches like gold on shattered glass. The cabin stood the way it always had, small, unbothered, quietly resilient. He unlocked the door, stepped inside, and let out a long, tired breath. The silence felt different now, not heavy, not hollow, just still. He sat on the edge of the cot, stared at the folded blanket Caleb had left behind, and for the first time in what felt like a century, he allowed his body to rest. His hands were scraped, his back screamed, but something inside him was finally quiet. There had been no medals, no parades, no thank you for your service banners, just a boy's hug, and that was enough. But the world wasn't done with Jordan Moore. At exactly 2:14 p.m., the camp's office phone rang. Terry, pale, twitchy, still shaken from the storm, picked it up. His voice cracked on the second, "Hello?" 30 seconds later, he was sprinting out of the office and across the trail like his pants were on fire, nearly tripping over a tree stump. "Jordan, hey, Jordan, man, you got a second?" Jordan stepped out of the tool shed slowly, brow raised. "You usually don't yell unless I forgot to mop something." Terry stopped, panting, holding up a shaking finger. You got a call. Line 2. It's him." Jordan's eyes narrowed. "Who?" Terry exhaled, half in awe, half in fear. "Richard Whitmore." The name hit the air like thunder. Jordan said nothing. He walked past Terry, calm, deliberate. Inside the office, the ancient landline phone was still off the hook. He picked it up, pressed it to his ear. "This is Jordan." A voice answered, measured low and, for once, unpolished. "Jordan, it's Richard. I figured. I didn't get a chance to say everything I should." Jordan glanced at the open window, where a squirrel dug through fallen pine needles like nothing had changed. "That makes 2 of us." There was a pause. Then Richard said something Jordan didn't expect. "I sent a team. Should be arriving soon." Jordan frowned. "Team? For what?" "To fix your cabin. Rebuild it. New roof, new plumbing, heating, electrical, whatever you need. And I sent a contractor. He'll handle the permits. You won't pay a dime." Jordan straightened slightly. His voice tightened. "That ain't necessary." Richard's tone didn't waver. "It is to me. Also, your son. Jacob Moore, right? 2nd year engineering at Midland State?" Jordan froze. "How do you know that?" "I make it my business to know the people who saved my son. He's getting a full scholarship. Tuition, housing, books, covered. No strings attached. The call's already been made." Jordan closed his eyes, jaw tightening, lips pressed together so hard they trembled. His voice came out rough. "You didn't have to." "I know," Richard interrupted, not with arrogance, but with finality. "That's why I did." There was nothing left to say. Jordan hung up without another word. Not rude, just done. And yet. Not finished. 30 minutes later, 3 black SUVs rolled through the camp's main gate. Workers in polos stepped out like a military unit, measuring, sketching, pulling samples from neatly labeled boxes. Terry hovered nearby, clearly trying to make himself useful. Jordan stood off to the side, arms folded, saying nothing. Watching. One of the workers approached. "Mr. Moore? We were told to ask you where you want the new foundation to go." Jordan looked toward cabin 12. Then down at the spot where the storm had ripped a tree clean from the earth. "Right there," he said. That night, as the sun dipped behind the trees and a light breeze returned to the broken campground, Jordan sat in a chair outside his cabin, hands resting on his knees, staring into the fire pit he'd rebuilt last fall. His phone buzzed. A message. From Jacob. "Dad? I just got the call. What did you do?" Jordan stared at the screen for a moment, then typed, "I did what was right. That's all." He set the phone down and leaned back. Somewhere out there, Caleb was probably sleeping in silk sheets. Richard Whitmore was probably already back in some glass tower with a view of the whole damn coast. But here, in the woods, in the quiet, Jordan had something better. Dignity. And the undeniable proof that even when you expect nothing, sometimes the world remembers you anyway. Weeks passed. The forest healed slower than the buildings, but it healed just the same. New planks replaced rotted boards. Trails reopened. The laughter of children slowly returned to Eagle Rock Wilderness Retreat. Campers came back with tents and firewood and stories of the storm. But none of them knew the full story. Not the one that mattered. The one about the man who didn't run. The man who stayed. Jordan Moore now lived in the same place, but nothing about his days felt the same. Cabin 12 had been rebuilt from the ground up. Hardwood floors, new insulation, a bed that didn't creak, a porch with 2 chairs instead of 1. The tool shed had been upgraded, reorganized, restocked. But Jordan still woke at sunrise, still wore the same sun-faded shirt, still carried his thermos and checked every trail himself, because that's what you do when your name means something again. And now it did. The campground staff started treating him differently, not with fear, not with worship, but with respect. Terry began greeting him each morning with a tight nod, eyes steady. Other campers waved when he passed. Some even stopped him to ask about storm safety or what kind of wood burned best. Jordan never bragged, never retold the story unless someone really asked. But the story had legs of its own. One day, a printed flyer appeared near the lodge. Cabin 12, where a hero stood still. He almost tore it down. Almost. Then he saw a group of school kids standing beneath it, pointing up, wide-eyed. He left it there. One Saturday morning, as the wind curled gentle through the trees and birds returned to their favorite branches, a black SUV rolled slowly down the gravel path toward the office. Jordan noticed it immediately, not because of the car, but because of the person who stepped out. It was Caleb. He was wearing shorts, sneakers, and a big crooked smile. His hair was longer now, his cheeks a little fuller, but Jordan recognized him in a heartbeat. The boy ran forward before anyone could call his name. Jordan stood as he approached. Caleb stopped just 2 steps away and blurted, "We're building something, for the other kids." Jordan blinked. "What kinda something?" The boy grinned, holding out a piece of paper, messy with crayons and tape. "A treehouse. My dad said we're going to build it near the back trail. You know, for kids who get scared during storms. He said it should feel safe, like your cabin did." Jordan looked down at the drawing. There was a big red arrow pointing to a little stick figure labeled The Helper. He couldn't speak, not right away. His chest rose, fell, rose again. When he finally looked up, Caleb was bouncing in place, excitement bubbling. "Can I show you the spot?" Caleb asked, already turning toward the path. Jordan smiled, really smiled, and followed. "Yeah, I think we better take a look." By the end of the afternoon, the 2 of them had marked the trees, cleared some brush, and sat on a log with 2 sandwiches packed by Caleb's nanny. The boy talked a mile a minute. Jordan didn't stop him once. That evening, after Caleb left, Jordan stayed out on the porch of Cabin 12 longer than usual. The fireflies had returned. The forest was alive again, and as he sipped from his thermos, he saw something new. A plaque near the trailhead, freshly mounted on a stone. He walked over, eyes squinting in the dusk. It read, "In honor of the man who didn't run. Jordan Moore, caretaker, neighbor, he." No fanfare, no speeches, just truth. He stood there a long time, hands in his pockets, eyes misting. Behind him, voices called from the lodge. Someone needed help moving canoes. He turned, called back, "Be right there," because the work never ends, and kindness once planted keeps growing. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.